a heavy burden. Hey, shouldn't you be helping out more around the house? If this is the kind of wife you're going to be, maybe it's better if you leave, my mother-in-law said sharply. Her tone was cold, and her stare cut through me like a knife. I felt my stomach drop. Before I could say anything, my sister-in-law, Denise, chimed in with a dismissive laugh. You always look exhausted, but it's not like you're actually getting anything done. I turned to my husband, Matthew, hoping for some support. My voice was shaky as I asked, don't you think they're being a little harsh? But instead of standing up for me, Matthew just sighed and nodded. I agree with them, he said bluntly. I'm swamped with work, and we really need you to step up. Honestly, you're just slowing us down. Maybe it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay. His words hit me like a slap. I looked at the three of them, my husband, his mother, and his sister, all staring at me like I was a problem they needed to get rid of. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I need some time to think, I said quietly before walking away. My life before marriage. My name is Lori, and I'm 35 years old. I have always taken my job seriously, balancing my work and home life as best as I can. These days, many women continue working after marriage, and I'm no different. I love my job and have been with my company since I graduated from college. Back when Matthew and I were dating, things were different. I first met him at a small cafe where he worked part-time. We would talk whenever I stopped by, and over time, our connection grew. Eventually, we started dating and talked about getting married. I thought we had a solid relationship built on understanding and support. Now, Matthew owns that same cafe. He's good at running the business, but he's terrible with paperwork. That's why, one morning before work, he handed me a folder stuffed with receipts and bills. Lori, can you take care of this? He asked, looking a little desperate. You should sort out the cafe's finances. I smiled and shook my head. Sorry, I'm not good with that stuff, I replied, hoping he would take the hint. I already had enough on my plate. Living with his mother. After we got married, Matthew made a suggestion. Mom's been lonely ever since Dad passed away. Why don't we move into the big house with her? At the time, I didn't think too much about it. I wanted to be a supportive wife, and I knew family was important to him, so I agreed. I soon realized that my mother-in-law had never been good at maintaining a household. After my father-in-law passed away, she relied on his pension and spent most of her time eating out or ordering takeout. The house was in poor condition, and since no one else was willing to take care of it, the responsibility fell on me. Matthew had very traditional beliefs about marriage. To him, household chores were strictly a wife's job. It didn't matter that I had a full-time career, I was still expected to cook, clean, and handle everything at home. As if that wasn't enough, my sister-in-law, Denise, often dropped by with her kids. The weekends, which I once looked forward to as a break from work, became even more exhausting. I spent my time cooking for her family, tidying up after the children, and barely getting any rest. One day, Denise made a surprising announcement. I'm getting divorced, she said casually. I'll be moving back here with the kids next month. I froze. Really? I asked, struggling to process what she had just said. Yes, and I plan to move in as soon as possible, she replied. At first, I thought that maybe this would be a good thing. I hoped that since Denise and I got along well, she might help out with the household chores. After all, she had children to care for, surely she'd want to contribute. But I was wrong. The never-ending workload. Denise, just like her mother, had no interest in housework. She spent most of her time lounging on the couch, snacking and watching TV. If anything, my workload only increased. Now, in addition to my job, I had to cook meals for her kids, prepare their school lunches, and clean up after everyone. Every day, I left for work early, stayed late, and came home exhausted, but the moment I stepped through the door, I was met with chaos, clothes piled up, dishes in the sink, toys scattered across the floor. No matter how hard I worked, my mother-in-law and Denise always found something to criticize. Lori, is dinner ready yet? My mother-in-law would ask the second I walked in. Why are you home so late? Denise would add, as if I had been out having fun instead of working all day. If I fell behind on chores, they were quick to point it out. There's a mountain of laundry waiting, my mother-in-law said one night. Don't use work as an excuse to slack off. Denise would pile on the guilt. Lori, don't you think the kids deserve homemade meals? You should put in more effort. I was already at my breaking point, but when I heard her laugh and joke, "Since Matthew owns a business, you don't really need to work, do you?" I felt something snap inside me. Enough was enough. Finding a solution. Late one night, after yet another exhausting day, I decided to talk to Matthew. "I'm really struggling," I admitted. "I have so much to do at work, and your mom and sister aren't helping at home. It's overwhelming." Matthew's face darkened. "Lori, are you bad-mouthing my family?" I took a deep breath. "No, I'm just saying it's too much for me to handle alone. If you helped out even a little, it would make a huge difference." Matthew scoffed. "I'm busy running the cafe. You're the wife, housework is your job." I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. He wasn't going to change. But that night, an idea came to me. I grabbed my phone, opened my favorite shopping app, and started adding items to my cart. If no one was going to help me, I would find my own way to make things easier. A few days later, my new household appliances arrived. A high-tech washing machine that could handle large loads with ease. A robotic vacuum that could clean the floors while I was at work. A smart rice cooker that made perfect rice with the press of a button. As I set up the new gadgets, my mother-in-law and Denise walked in, looking surprised. "Wow, Lori, that's a fancy washing machine," my mother-in-law commented, "but the old one still worked, didn't it?" I smiled. "It was getting slow. This one is much faster." They looked at the cleaning robot and kitchen appliances with curiosity. "I also upgraded these," I said, feeling a small sense of victory. If no one else would make my life easier, I would do it myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had taken control of my own life again. "Are you even considering our household needs?" my mother-in-law challenged, her voice sharp and filled with disapproval. I hesitated, trying to gather my thoughts. "I am, but I'm just a bit exhausted," I admitted, hoping my honesty would soften the tension. "That's enough," she snapped. "I can't believe you're our daughter-in-law." My sister-in-law, Denise, folded her arms and scoffed. "I'll watch over Matthew. We don't need someone like you here." I turned to Matthew, my husband, desperately seeking support. Instead, he sighed and said coldly, "I understand what Mom and Denise are saying. It's difficult having a wife who—" His voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. He had already made up his mind. As they left the room, their words echoed in my head, each syllable weighing me down. But amidst the pain, a spark of resolve ignited within me. I had chosen to invest in new household appliances to make life easier, and I had no regrets. If they couldn't see the value of my efforts, that was their loss. Then, Matthew turned to me, his expression unreadable. "I have my store, so I decide how to spend my money. But being with someone who spends without thinking might be too hard for me." His words cut deep, but I forced myself to remain composed. I held his gaze and silently counted to 12 in my mind, a technique I had learned to stay calm in moments like this. And then, with a cruel smirk, he delivered the final blow. "Also, I've noticed things have been going well with the new part-time girl at the store. She's more attractive than you are now. Maybe it's time for you to find a new place to live." A surge of anger bubbled inside me, but I refused to let him see me break. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "All right, I'll look for a new home." Matthew leaned back, clearly satisfied with my response. "Finally, you understand. I'll feel much better without you around." That night, he signed the divorce papers without hesitation. I packed only the essentials and moved into a nearby weekly rental, clutching the divorce documents as if they were my newfound freedom. As I left, no one stopped me. No one begged me to stay. And in that moment, I realized the truth: I had never really mattered to them. Starting over. The divorce was finalized at the city office without much fuss. Shortly after, I found a stylish new apartment and began rebuilding my life. Around the same time, an unexpected opportunity arose, a promotion to section manager. It was a position I had previously turned down due to my family obligations. Now, with nothing holding me back, I embraced it fully. Work became my solace. I dedicated myself to my role, and with each passing day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and accomplishment. The past felt like a distant memory, and I was finally moving forward. Then, one day, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed a name I hadn't seen in a long time, my former mother-in-law. Surprised, I ignored the call, assuming she had nothing important to say. But a year later, on a quiet weekend as I lounged in my apartment listening to my favorite music, my phone rang again. This time, curiosity got the better of me. "Hello? Is something wrong?" I asked cautiously. "Lori, I finally got through." "I didn't think you would answer after so many calls," she said, her voice uncertain. "Well, it's been a while." "What's going on?" There was a brief hesitation before she asked, "How's your new life?" Despite the odd question, I answered truthfully. "It's great. I love my new apartment, and work is going smoothly. I even got a promotion, and I'm enjoying my freedom." She sighed before blurting out, "Lori, can you come back home?" I froze for a moment. "Why?" "We're struggling financially." I had suspected as much. Matthew's Cafe barely made $2,000 a month, and with no one else in the family working, it was only a matter of time before they ran into trouble. Matthew's Cafe only makes about $2,000 a month, right? "If no one else in the family works, things could be tough," I said calmly. "You knew about that?" she asked, surprised. "Of course," I replied. I managed all the finances. Matthew liked to pretend he was a successful business owner, but he was oblivious to the reality. I covered his losses with my own salary. There was silence before she admitted, "We had no idea you were doing so well at your job or that you were contributing so much." "Yes, I contributed more than $5,000 every month. Thanks to that, you all managed." Realization dawned on her. "So, now that you're gone." "Now that I'm gone, the truth is finally sinking in," I finished for her. "Lori, can you please come back?" she pleaded. I was curious. "How's Matthew's Cafe doing now?" She sighed heavily. "We might have to close soon. The part-time workers keep quitting." I almost laughed at the irony. It's hard to keep a business running, isn't it? And without proper financial management, it's even harder. Since you left, the house is a mess. Things are everywhere. "Without you, everything fell apart," she admitted, her tone now filled with regret. "What do you mean?" I asked. She described the disarray. The house was unkempt, belongings scattered, and meals were now expensive takeout. The washing machine had broken down, and they couldn't afford a new one. "The appliances I took back, I relied on them," she confessed. "But they were mine," I pointed out. "I bought them for my convenience. It was fair that I took them with me." She hesitated. "I guess so, but I never realized housework was this challenging." With a slight smirk, I said, "Well, you have 3 adults in the house. What are Matthew and Denise doing?" She sounded exhausted. "Matthew is depressed. He spends his days lazing around at home." "And Denise?" "She does nothing and still expects an allowance from me. Living on just my pension is tough." I chuckled softly. "Denise once told me I was unnecessary because she was there. Seems like she wasn't as helpful as she thought." "Lori, we're really in trouble," she said desperately. "Please reconsider." I stayed silent for a moment before replying, "I have no intention of returning to that house. It must be hard living with all that baggage." She sighed in defeat, but before I could hang up, she whispered, "Lori, I'm really sorry. Can we ever spend time together again like before?" I smiled to myself. Was it really that hard without me? I asked, already knowing the answer.